Welcome back to another episode of Adventures in Machine Learning. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Burke, and I do data engineering and machine learning at Databricks. Today, I am joined by my co-host,
Ben Wilson. I do quarterly roadmap planning at Databricks.
Today, we are joined by Luis Garcia. He started his career in academia and then moved into software engineering. And then in 2003, he joined Sale University as Director of Curriculum Development. And then over the next 20-ish years, he held a variety of positions at Sale. Currently, he's the co-founder of Collectiva, an organization offering fractional executive services for game tech startups. And I know this is an area that Ben is passionate about, so we'll get into that for sure. But before we do that, Luis, you served a variety of offices, at least departments in Brazil, Venezuela, and the U.S. And I was curious how you approach doing business in non-U.S. countries.
Oh boy, that's a little bit of a loaded question because there's some allure into international business. It's always great to interact with other cultures in other countries. But what folks sometimes don't understand is that the U.S. is the exception in a lot of great things about business, and the regulatory framework for doing business in the U.S. is incredibly friendly for businesses. The U.S. is easy to create a business. You go to a website, do a few things, push a couple buttons, and there you got a company. And we take that for granted in the U.S. And we think that that's how the rest of the world works, but it's not like that. Most of the world, it takes months and 6 months, a year to create a company just to do that step. So it's very easy to create companies and to fail in the U.S., which is so important for entrepreneurship and so for creativity and innovation. And also the regulatory framework around employees is also very different. The U.S. is very business friendly, which some people may argue is not a good thing for the employees. But it also goes to that point of allowing businesses to be created and fail quickly. So I'll give you an example. In many countries, by law, you have to provide paid vacation to the employees. Sometimes it can be a month, by law. So if you're a startup, if you have to give somebody a month of paid vacation, I mean, you may not be able to afford that. And so it's difficult to start a business. It's expensive, and then it's expensive to fail. And so all that to give you that Latin American countries are very much like that, very pro-employee, very difficult on businesses. So the way you approach it is with a lot of patience. And speaking the language is not enough. It's a great thing because you can communicate with people easier. So I obviously speak Spanish, and I also speak Portuguese. So it allows me to communicate with people and connect with them. And but that's just part of the equation. And doing businesses overseas is really hard.
Does it differ in academia?
Well, it's academia here in the U.S. works a lot like Latin America. You got this thing called tenure, and folks in academia get a lot of vacation and a lot of big benefits. So I would say no, probably it's similar. If you work in academics, probably it's similar, and that you take the summer off, that kind of stuff. And but in business, it is very different. And also the other part is that, and I'll try to choose my words, the American worker tends to be a lot more focused and self-driven and accountable than workers from other countries. And again, the US being the exception. So you think that everybody's like that, and it's not. The workers in other parts of the world require a lot more follow-up and to finish tasks. And and that again adds to the complexity. So I approach it again with a lot of patience.
Got it.
Yes.
Ben, you've worked with hundreds of companies, some of them no doubt not in the US. What are your thoughts on the topic?
I couldn't agree on Luis's summarization more. Like, particularly if you're an American who's never dealt with, what I've seen is like Americans that are born here, second, third, fourth generation Americans, regardless of what country of origin your family comes from, you're American. Even though Americans love to say like, oh, I'm Brazilian. It's like, no, your great grandparents were born here. You're American. You speak like you're from the Central Valley. They don't get exposed to cultures. People that come to this country in this business environment and the culture here, this capitalistic, business focused, like industry focused country. I've noticed that they don't really understand how the rest of the world actually functions and the fact that work is not life elsewhere. So when they end up having to interact with people and companies in different parts of the world that don't share that same culture, they find it like really frustrating. I've heard comments from people like, oh, these people that I'm working with, they're so lazy. I'm like, no, they just have other priorities like family and food and enjoying life. You're an American, you grew up here and you work in this tech company or something, and that's your focus is like, I want to build cool stuff or get famous or something. Like, they don't care, it's a job to them. And the people that I've seen that are successful that interacting with people from other countries are doing I'm going to walk in your shoes and understand this from your perspective and actually ask questions like, hey, get to know the person a little bit and you get to understand like where their headspace is. And if you can get to a common ground that way, you can learn to work together really well and learn stuff from each other.
Yeah. It reminds me, one of my first overseas engagement was in Australia for Databricks, and it was quite the experience. I was there for like 3 weeks. They put me up in a pretty nice hotel. I lived out of a hotel, which was an interesting experience. But what I was so surprised about is the like total volume of hours that people worked. It was like 5 or something, 6 maybe. And they get stuff done generally, but it's just a very different culture from traveling to SF to the SF office and seeing people like there from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. just writing code nonstop. It was pretty mind blowing. And like the value of team camaraderie, having a 1 or 2 hour lunch, like spending time together. It's just a very different set of priorities, and whatever makes you happy.
A month vacation,
Exactly. Yeah. Which honestly, right now wouldn't be too bad. I wouldn't mind being in Australia, but yeah. Okay, interesting. So going back to your life in academia, you held a variety of positions. Can you walk us through why you took so many different styles of jobs?
Yeah, I think it has to do more with how I approach work than anything else. Established organizations need people to innovate inside, and sometimes that doesn't mean that you come up with great ideas. You just come up with. Sometimes it means that you execute somebody else's great ideas, and especially with universities are entities that have a very clear business business framework. They get revenue from tuition, and in the case of Full Sail University where I work, revenue only came from tuition, and so that business model is very simple. So if student population is going up, everybody's happy. If student population is coming down, we're in trouble. And to that extent, everything is very focused into as they should, and make sure that students are being educated and trained and being successful. And but it's very hard to then innovate inside that. And many times the ideas are there, there's just no one to implement them, no one to really explore them. So I have made a career of being the guy that say, well, okay, I'll do it, and raise my hand and say, okay, I'll try it. And what I tried to do, because I spent there 19 years, and is that come up with an effort that will take about 5 years to do. And because after 5 years, I can't imagine myself doing the same thing anyway. And but it also serves a purpose for the organization. If you start something new and it is successful, the best thing you can do is step out of it and let somebody else run it and take it to the next level. That creates career opportunity for others, and then allows me to go do something else. And so that's what I did. So when you look at my tenure there, it's about 5-year projects. And so we'll set up a goal in 5 years, usually had to do with student population of a particular set of programs or new programs that we're going to launch, or a big effort. And 3 years in, if it's going to happen or not, because it's not linear. It's usually a little bit, and slower at first. And then if you get the traction that you need to have by the second or third year, you're going to get there or not. So by the second or third year, I knew if it was going to happen. If it wasn't going to happen, then we folded. We found a new project. And if it was going to happen, and then we'll continue run it. And then the 5th year was basically a transition year, finding my replacement, seeing where this fits in the overall organization, transitioning that, and then I will be out of a job in 5 years in, and then looking for a new one. So that's how I did it usually. Can be really busy. No.
Okay, lots of really interesting points. One that I wanted to ask more about is, how do you think about being replaced? Do you train the person below you? Because you said it's important after the 5 years to let other people have the same opportunity. Mm-hmm. Do you facilitate that, or do you just get out of the way and let someone else come in?
No, usually you have to always be thinking about who can replace you in the role that you're doing. And I think that's true for every organization. And it's important for 2 reasons. Number one, if you make yourself irreplaceable, then you are irreplaceable. And then that not only means that somebody cannot replace you, it also means that you cannot do anything else. And I don't like that. And I prefer to change. And so I do facilitate it. I usually, if whatever you do, you're growing, and there's people under you, and then you start observing who can the people. Sometimes it's not only one, sometimes it's a couple, because as a general manager, you do different roles. And if it grows enough, it really is 2 roles or 3 roles, depending. And so I'm always in the lookout to be able to replace myself. I think it's irresponsible if you don't have a replacement of yourself. And because you can be, run by a truck outside, and then if the whole effort falls apart because of you, I see it as a bad on me. And so, yeah, I very much facilitates it to find my replacement. But it's not my replacement of my person; it's the replacement of the different roles that I do. And sometimes it can be 2 or 3 people.
Yeah, and that 1 month vacation is pretty tough if you are essential and irreplaceable.
Oh, then you can never do that. No.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, cool. Do you have any skills or learnings that you got from the 20 years in academia? Like, what do you think you developed in that time frame that you wouldn't have gotten in the private sector?
Well, I work for a private university, and so it felt very much like a corporate job to me. And because I wasn't really in the faculty, I didn't teach, but I did work a lot with them. And so I was very much a general manager inside a university. People don't think of universities as corporations, but they really are. And they have a lot of employees. They have different departments. They have sales. They have finance. They have HR. They have operations. It's very. They open. They close. They merge. They buy others. I mean, we don't like talking about that, but it really is a corporation. So for me, it really felt like a corporation. What is different is that it is a consumer business with a long sales cycle. And what I mean by that is the students, and depending if they're the traditional students that comes from high school into university takes about 2 to 3 years to make that decision. And but you're speaking directly to a consumer. So usually consumer businesses have short sales cycles. This is a consumer business with a long sales cycle. And so it's, in that sense, is very unique. I think it prepared me to be in the B2B world. And because it gets me, it's very relationship driven, and you know, no one goes to a website, sign up for a university. You know, there's always lots of conversations involved, and there's a lot of bonding that you have to do in connection with those customers and with their parents. So it's a complicated sale. And so it really prepared me for the B2B world, which is very much like that. It's very relationship driven. The sales cycles are long. And so I think that's something that you can translate very well.
That's how I've always thought about particularly the private education and public education systems in collegiate level, is actually the B2B model, because it's more reputation based from what I have seen.
Yeah.
And the marketing effort, and like you have to focus on the image of your business and what quality you're portraying to your potential clients, which are the students, because you can see what happens with the U.S. News and World Report, like college rankings that comes out. You're like, I can only imagine what the provost of the university or the chancellor is waiting for this report coming out, which is similar to like the Forrester report for big tech. You're like, where do we rank on this? And what's our image? When you actually think about it, like, it's not that important. It has no bearing directly on the services that we provide, but it's people's perception of those services about when they're going to make a big decision like that. It's, I think you nailed it. It's very much like B2B. Like that word of mouth and that reputation status means everything.
It means everything. And in our case, what we did is that we promoted the success of our graduates. And that also translates very well for the B2B world, because in the B2B world, you're usually serving another company and help that company be more successful. So their success story becomes your success story. And in the university world, the way we did it at our university, it was all about promoting the success of our graduates. So that our graduates were doing great. Then those were the stories that we were using to shape our brand, like you're saying, Ben, for the incoming students to see. And so they can reflect themselves. If somebody went to this university and ended up working at Google or Universal Pictures, or because we were very entertainment driven, and now they are directing a movie, and for those that were filmmaking, aspiring filmmakers, or won a Grammy for those that were going for recording engineering, or worked in the AAA games that came out, then they thought, okay, so that person came to this university, did all that, and then end up in that place. It's not a guarantee, obviously, but you can draw that direct connection. And the B2B world where I live right now, that's very much it. I mean, you empower a customer with your platform. If they do better, then that's your success story. Their success story becomes your success story.
Saucy question. How much attribution should a university get for the success of its students? Business success.
I think a lot. And the time that you spend in a university is a very transformational time. And even if the skill set isn't directly tied to what you end up doing, and the connections that you make, the ability to think and solve problems, which is basically what undergrad is for, it shapes the rest of your career. And even the long careers, because what we observe over time is that professionals end up having 2 or 3 different careers. And the one that they do right out of schools usually is the most tied to the skill they learn. And but then the success after the 5th year, the 10th year, 15 year, 20 years, and what they trade back is certain behaviors that they learn in college. And so I do think, and some people will disagree with this, and some folks like to say that they learn nothing in college, and all the success is absolutely only theirs. And I don't deny that in maybe some of those cases, for the most part, and you're learning how to think and how to behave, and that carry you very far.
And also even outside of academia, just like how to live as an adult. Like typically that's the first time people are living away from home, how to like take care of yourself, how to manage stress, how to, so many things, how to build relationships. And those are just as important as we were talking about earlier. Your job is not the whole world. Okay, cool. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit. Colectiva or colectiva?
Colectiva, but
Okay, cool.
I love to actually talk about Pete, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure.
And although Colectiva is my own practice, and I work with great companies and with Colectiva in very exciting technologies. And I joined Pete about a year ago, and it's a AI company that creates educational materials automatically. And that's where my focus is the most these days.
Got it. Okay, so let's do like 2 seconds on Colectiva.
Okay.
Just for the gaming context.
Absolutely, yes.
So how do you guys approach funding, and how do you guys approach finding a good idea?
So it's kind of the other way around. I think that what I have found with Colectiva is that there are entrepreneurs out there trying to create a technology, but they're missing everything else. And because when you're creating a product and you need funding, you're really creating two products. You're creating the technology product that's going to serve a customer, and you're creating a financial product that's going to give a return to somebody. So when I get approached by entrepreneurs, it's because they're not really paying attention to that other thing, which means it's like, sometimes you have a brand that you have a marketing strategy in place, you have a product strategy in place. If an investor comes and look into this because they are excited about your product, are they seeing only a product, or are they seeing a company? And so that's what my focus has been in there, in helping those entrepreneurs. And I chose technology and gaming because it's an exciting place where there's a lot of investment, and those entrepreneurs tend not to have a lot of business experience. And I have a lot of affinity there because Full Self is a leader in gaming technologies and education, so I have a lot of affiliation with that, and that's why we went into that. And so my focus has been in trying to give them room to do everything else, and besides building a fantastic product.
Got it. Okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for that brief interlude. Back to Pete. So as you were alluding to, it offers the ability to generate technical materials at scale. How did you get into the AI space, for starters?
Well, I mean, I think we all been in AI, whether we like it or not, for a very long time. And every time I grow an organization, at some point you run into the exact same problem. In the first person you hire learns from you. The third person hired learns from the second. The fourth person, but that doesn't scale when you are in 50, 60, going to 100. And things become more complex. And you need to onboard and train and address learning gaps and getting people ready for their job faster, more efficiently. So the solution is, okay, well, I got to create a training program for this. And if you have done that before, you realize it's a lot more difficult than you think. But most people haven't done it before. So what they do is say, I'm going to go to my experts. So I'm going to go to Ben, who has been doing that for a very long time. And you're the expert, so therefore you're the trainer. And then Michael, you've been doing that you're the expert, you're the trainer. Therefore you're the trainer. Or sometimes are the actual experts realizing that they're spending too much time onboarding new people, that they say, I need to do something at least for myself. Even if it's for myself, and then they sit down and trying to translate their expertise into training materials, and that's when they realize this is a lot harder than I thought. And so a project that perhaps they thought, because I'm a programmer too, so I'm gonna say this without wanting to offend anybody, but we think we're smarter than everybody else, and And I said, "Oh, that'll take me a couple hours." And they realize it's not even a couple of days or a couple of weeks. It's really when you try to do something, some good training materials, it takes a couple of months. Because the process of translating expertise into content materials for training is not simple. And it's called instructional design. You hire a person whose job is to interview a subject matter expert and trying to translate that knowledge into training materials. And that's very expensive, very, very complicated to do. In the world that I'm describing, usually you don't do a good job. The expert creates some PowerPoints or some Google Slides, put them in a drive somewhere, and people cannot take them, and some of them don't take it, and you just stumble and live with that problem as long as you can. And so my co-founder, who is a CTO and exited from a fintech company, had this problem too in his last exit, because they acquired 4 companies and they're trying to bring all these people along. And they say, there got to be a better way to solve this problem. And we were friends from here in Orlando, the tech ecosystem. And he said, do you think we can use that generative AI for that? And I'm like, yes, I was thinking the same thing. And you can literally automate the process of instructional design. And if it's not 100%, at least 90%. And so build a prototype, and we got clients immediately, because they could take the procedures, what already they're doing, then put it into our software and get courses out. And we also then acquired a small learning management system, which is a content system for distribution of learning, And so it's centralized, so it's not living in different drives that people, and you can actually track who's taking what. But the part that really excites me is that in the education equation, you have 3 components. You have the content, you got the distribution, and those two, the distribution is the one that has been addressed for the last 20-something years, and learning management systems have been around. And it's not really, technically, there's nothing really complicated there. But the content development is the part that we address. But the part that seldom addressed is the part of evaluation of learning. In education, we call that assessment. And how do you know that the person learned? How much did they actually learn? And in the traditional education world, it's been like, well, I'll do this test. I have a question, different options, and sometimes they have open-ended questions that's more fancy. It's more complicated to evaluate. Teachers don't like that because it takes a lot of their time. In the digital world, that didn't really help either. Digital world was even easier to automate the test. And because now the machine can actually know which one, the computer can actually do the grading. And so we've been really stuck in assessment for a very long time, trying to find out a good method to measure the level of learning. And more sophisticated methods include project-based, doing projects, and having a conversation with the learner, trying to go deeper into what they know, what they don't know, identifying gaps, trying to fill up those gaps. You can't really do that at scale. And you can't do it in person. You can't really do it in digital education when the ratio is structured to students much larger. But with generative AI, you can. And so we've been building also tools for evaluation of learning when we can have conversational assessment at scale. Because you build a knowledge base to create the course, and you define the learning outcomes that you want somebody to learn afterwards. That's part of the instructional design process. So why not put a conversational AI on top of that knowledge base and then have a conversation with the learner, a one-on-one personalized conversation with the learner to see how much they learn? And so now we're including that also into our solution.
Wow. Yeah, awful lot to unpack there.
Yes.
I just wanted to add anecdotally, I believe in your company, 100%.
Thank you.
I think this idea, you basically productize something that we, in like maintainers of ML Flow, as we've been working on making our docs not terrible and adding stuff like tutorials and guides. The sheer amount of effort that goes into doing that manually, where sometimes a feature is built and all you have is the source code. You might have been the person that wrote it, or you can definitely read it because you're, a fellow maintainer. But then how do you craft, a tutorial for somebody who's never even heard of this feature, doesn't really know how to use it or what it's there for. It takes a lot of cognitive load to put yourself in the shoes of that person and craft something. It's an art and a skill as well, as a technical skill. And it just takes a lot of time. You think about scoping of something like that, like, oh, let's talk about this, like, introduction to a major part of this product. How do we teach people about this, like a beginner? And then how do we teach an advanced person about, specific new features? You're now talking about a week of time to talk about a moderately sized feature, and another week of revising that, because you have to get peer review. But your peer review is not a fellow developer. It's people that aren't familiar with it and get their feedback from this. And that iterative process takes just a very long time. So we all use ChatGPT. I have a series of prompts that I've written that are pages long that I insert into my session and say, and it gives very clear instructions about who the audience is, what the tech is, what code I'm going to be pasting in, what sort of style I want, formatting, and what tone to use. And we can bang out, new feature documentation. We don't copy paste directly into the docs, but having that assistive tool with that process means that we can get a full tutorial or a guide done in a day that used to take a month. And as another anecdote to what you're saying, that evaluation thing, we actually built a prototype to do something like that about teaching concepts. Just did it for fun. It's like, I wonder how well ChatGPT could do something like this. Like, if I get a good prompt and then give it a couple of good and bad examples of something, I was shocked at how well it could evaluate my own knowledge of content that I gave it. And when you start talking about marrying a system like that up to, vector search indices, where you can provide contextual information and then get, massive document dump that goes into the input to a generative AI, and it can look up the right answers in a vast body of text. You all of a sudden can create, like, I was amazed at how much fun I was having with it. And
that's so cool.
Yeah. Did a scrape of Wikipedia for like some obscure topic that I didn't really know much about. I was like, evaluate my knowledge. It started generating questions and stuff, and I was typing it, and it's telling me, like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Here's the right answer. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Wish I had this when I was in college,
No. Absolutely.
Are you familiar with Conmigo?
I am not.
So the Khan Academy created.
Oh yeah, Conmigo. Yes. So they very love what they're doing in that direction. They want to actually be in the support and assessment side of it, and I think they're starting more with the support side, which is kind of just answer questions and from the student and they also wanted to have guardrails where it will give away what the answer without giving away how to do the answer, because they're scared that the students are going to use it to do their homework, which I have mixed feelings about, but I can understand why they do it like that.
One thing that really made me nerd out about your product, though, is the ability to basically text to speech in your own voice.
Yes.
And how well is that received by both trainees and curriculum developers?
So
is it uncanny valley level of people being like, that's kind of weird hearing like my colleague's voice, even though I know they didn't record this, but it sounds exactly like them? Or does everybody just love it?
Yeah, they actually love it. And when the instructor or creator of expert have already created courses that included their voice, they have gone through the frustration of writing the script, getting behind a microphone, reading out, and then playing the course in front of people or getting, and then realizing that wasn't the right tone, that wasn't the right phrase, and then going back and re-record and re-record and re-record, and rewriting and re-recording. And so we have had customers that have licensed our product just because of that. It's just gonna give me so much time back. That feature alone is worth having your product. So that's for people that already tried it. For people that have never really developed courses and they really love the idea of using artificial intelligence for training. So people think of training as something really personal still, and there's something that is a little uncomfortable about it. So having their voice be part of it is something that brings them a lot of comfort in that, because it humanizes the courses a lot. It's just not a bunch of slides with bullets in them, and is more than that. And for the learner, it gives you another cognitive dimension beyond readings only. It gives you the reading and the voice as well, which is known to help in the process. Some people will just listen to the voice or not read. Some people just want to read. Some people want to do both. So it helps the learning process for sure.
Potentially silly question for you. How many users have attempted to generate training material with Sir David Attenborough's voice reading?
Well, so we have very close stuff our demo side. So at our demo side, they cannot supply their own voice. We supply the voice, so we don't have to do that, and also to be and in order to get a course with a voice in it, we are in the middle, and so to make sure that somebody's gonna not do something undesirable with it, or more important to us, we want to generate leads. So that's why we put a gate in the other side. It's one per customer. Usually the customer uses one voice, and that's what they go for. And cool thing is, like, we're experimenting now is with different languages in the same voice.
Nice.
And customers that may have employees that speak different languages, the expert and the learning outcomes are the same. It's one course, but then we can deliver a version of it in different languages and basically have somebody that doesn't speak Spanish speak Spanish.
How well does it get? Now we're going into nerd tech territory. Sure. If you have somebody who's a native Spanish speaker from Mexico City record their voice, and then can you actually have your tool say, I want a Colombian accent? And will it actually do it correctly?
Yes, we have not done that. I have my reservations with that, because I do think that at that level, at that point, you're really being unauthentic. And so customers in Latin America, like we have customers from Argentina right now, and they do have a strong accent, and they we ask them, we supply them with scripts, and they have to read it. I think it's important for the personality of the instructor to come through, even if the voice is being generated synthetically. And so I actually wouldn't recommend they do that. And I think it will be a technical challenge to do as well, but I don't think that it's a good thing to do. Now, that doesn't mean that they should have tried to avoid expressions that are only understood in particular regions. You should always try to avoid that a little bit if you want the content to be consumed in the whole region. But I don't think you should strip down your accent to do that.
Interesting.
Yes.
That does make sense, yeah. If you're looking for consumable content, sort of the traditional Spanish or the traditional English. I mean, at the same time, though, typically in language settings, there's British English and American English.
That's right.
So, yeah.
You could. I think that people should be who they are, and the idea of this is enhancing what you do, be able to multiplier effect, not to make you be somebody you're not. However, it does. I am smiling at the irony that you just said that I can make you speak a different languages that you actually don't speak, and I don't know how genuine that is, but I do think suppressing somebody's accent and trying to speak in a different accent, that is changing your personality.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I had another question about sort of the RAG application of basically putting documents into a vector search, chunking them, making sure they're easily retrievable, and then using that to create content. That's
right.
a well-defined use case as of the past 6 months or whenever it came out, probably a lot earlier. In terms of evaluating human learning, that is such a fundamentally human thing. And just initially, I'm wary to offload that to artificial intelligence. For instance, is retrieval, like knowing a topic and being able to regurgitate a fact, is that knowledge? Or do you need to be able to work with those facts to build and create something new? So with that, how do you guys define knowledge and learning? Is there like a default it's probably retrieval, right?
That's a good question. And it really depends. The way we think about it is we think about it in learning outcomes. And in education, you think about their levels of knowledge requires, if it's fundamental knowledge, all the way to the pyramid if you are in the ADDIE model or whatever. And is that as you move up levels of cognition, you move, it becomes information that requires a lot more critical thinking. So when you define a course, you define what's called learning outcomes, which is what do I want the learner to know? And that very well could be just repeating something back. And there are roles that are purely memory based. And if, for instance, one of our customers, we have several venues. For some reason, venues really like our product because they have a lot of temporary people that come the game of the show, the day of the show, the day of the game. Those are not employees; those are temporary employees that they came in. They go from 50 employees to 250 on a day, and then back to 50, right? And so those additional 200 employees receive very little training. Creating digital courses for them is cost prohibitive because it's very small margins. But with our tool, they can do it. So now they are training them in things that they didn't know before, and like a little bit of the history of the venue, some customer service, some facts, and that very much is memorization. So the learning outcome for those courses are being able to repeat back. And what you're talking about is, okay, what happens when I have to take 2 or 3 pieces of information, synthesize it, and create something new, which is higher level thinking. Then you have to define learning outcomes that will get there, and then define the activities that will give you those learning outcomes. You have to kind of teach the whole machine, the whole process of learning in order to get there. We haven't really done that yet. And so it will be very interesting. For sure, memorization and some level of interpretation is definitely can be done. We've done test for like call center. And so call center, you have to make sure that you meet certain benchmarks in the conversation. And AI can very much evaluate those and give you a good grade or a bad grade or even a suggestion based on that. But if you were to have a course on how to come up with new relativity theories in quantum mechanics, I don't know yet. Usually not our customers are not trying to do that. They're really trying to do very basic stuff. Yeah.
Probably a different demographic.
Yes.
I mean, I think this, like, looking at your product and the market that you're trying to address seems like very broad when this, so I think stuff like this is going to eventually really take off with respect to things that people don't really think about too much, which is even for extremely high technical positions in roles. We just hired a new manager for our team. Some like 16 years experience in some of the biggest tech companies in the world. And this lady has some serious software development chops, and is a brilliant human being. But coming into a new organization that's already pretty mature and has a whole bunch of history about things that, for people that have been around for a while in that organization, you don't even realize how much tribal knowledge has been built up. And then you start realizing how potentially broken some of the systems are, for how like inefficient it is to do something when a new person who has context at other places comes in and they start asking questions like, hey, how do we get this thing to happen? And you're like, man, this isn't intuitive, but I have a feeling that there's going to be, 1,500 questions that are going to be asked over the next 9 months about critical business processes, about how to do this role, just to onboard somebody. And having a tool that can sit there and go through all of our documentation, like our internal documentation that is private within our department, about like what are all of our processes for doing stuff like responding to an emergency, to how do we follow up from us shipping a regression, to what are all of the processes for doing stuff like planning out work for a quarter, or how do we manage stuff like making sure that our engineers are taking off enough time throughout the year. Wow. There's all these procedures that we have and processes that are just, they're everywhere. They're in all these different systems, and you have to really know how those systems are designed to even find where that information is, or whether that information even exists in written form. So having a RAG solution with all of this advanced capability and being able to just say, because I've been looking at your FAQ and your use cases, it's just super cool. You can always like chatbot and say, hey, I have a general question about this thing. And they can get the exact right answer instantaneously. Within seconds, you're going to have, here's a summarization of this, and then here's a link to this document if you want to go and read the whole thing, and have that actually prompt that person with, like, what other questions do you have about this? And I can go find out more information. I think that's going to be just part of core business operations. And it's such a critical part of efficient operations at a company, is to empower people to be successful earlier in their time.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, one of the use cases that we do not have yet, and I love to have, is with technical people, because no matter who you are or how much experience you have, every time you onboard a new technical person to your team, they have to learn your tech stack. They have to learn your processes. They have to learn. I mean, there's no other way around it. And usually they just stumble until they finally get it and they're integrated. And I do not know many technical teams that will go to HR and tell them, helping me create an onboarding for my team. They will not do that, because they think that they won't be able to do something as good as they can, but they don't sit down and do it either. And so I love to have a use case specifically for tech stack for technology teams, because I think it will be a very big hit in technical teams.
Yeah, because you'd have supporters not just from like the human resources department. Like, I think they would be supportive of that. They're like, hey, this helps retention. This helps people feel like they're cared for, basically, at the company when they're coming on. But to anybody in engineering leadership who wants to get an employee enabled and empowered to contribute and to feel like they're not lost at sea, wondering like, I don't even know who to ask this question. I asked these 3 people on the team. None of them know this, because they've never had to work on this thing. But having a source system that can say, hey, where does this one part of our tech stack run CI every night? And then like have that system be able to look that up and understand deployment architecture of like, hey, for this particular test failure that you're seeing, this actually runs here. Here's the link to gain access to this system.
And you're not teaching them technology. and or how to program or
Right.
any of that. And we're not taking on any of that. It's just teaching you how this organization works. And
Exactly.
So, anyways, I'm so glad that you get it so well and that you're supportive of it.
Yeah, just to add a little bit, it's also a really nice application of RAG because at Databricks we use Glean, which is basically ingest a bunch of documents, put it into a vector store, put an LLM on top of it. And a common issue with these is, yes, they apply citations and things like that, but how do you know it's correct? How do you know it's up to date? And then there's a lot of back end that you have to implement so that you have all of the sources. So Google Docs, email, Slack, Confluence, you name it. And with your application, it's one static dump of content. It creates courses. And then from there, you can optimize within that static set of documents. So it's sort of easier on the back end. And then you can, because of that, you can focus on the actual human knowledge, human learning, the growth aspect, which is really exciting to me.
Thank you.
And it reduces the information overload as well. Because like smart search engines, I'm not the biggest fan of, because usually you have data dumps internally in your company. Like we have 150,000 Confluence pages that have been contributed to over the last 10 years. Nobody's pruning that stuff. Like sometimes groups that maintain the source of truth, they're going to go in there and clean that up and maintain it. But a lot of times, like, how do you effectively flag stuff as stale, out of date, needs to be revised? And where do you get the people to revise all of that stuff? Training courses give you the ability to restrict that amount of information and refine the input data in a much better way. It prevents you from that explosion of, like, I don't know which of these things that returned are actually valid right now. Yeah.
Awesome.
I would use it today if we had it.
So I have one final question.
Yes, sir.
So we've talked about evaluation. Do you guys speed up the learning process beyond just having an interactive assistant to work with? Do you have any like tips or tricks that you actually implement on the back end so people learn better?
Man, that's exciting. And I don't think we have been around long enough to be able to get there. And but I think as we go a lot longer, have a longer engagement, we definitely can get there. Part of that excites me is be able for the system to tell you the learning gaps instead of you telling the system the learning gaps. And so let's say, we have the organization creates a series of courses that everybody has to take, right? But then be able to go in the background and say, okay, well, all these people took these courses, but Ben is missing on this and Michael is missing on that. Let's create micro courses on the fly for them so that they can fill those gaps. And I think that's completely doable and is in the roadmap, but we're probably a year away from that. And I think for sure, if we had that today, I would tell you, yeah, there's no way we're not affecting the learning speed. And for a lot of our customers, we're replacing nothing, or we're replacing a manual of processes. And the best they can do is say, these people, I give it to this person and I give it to that person, and hopefully they'll read it. And so the difference is massive from that into having a course that people take, ingest and get evaluated on. And but I think that's just the very basic. I mean, we can take this very far.
Yeah, I'm thinking back, like now, this discussion is making me go back decades now into when I was studying for the NRC board. So whenever you're going to get qualified to operate a nuclear reactor in the United States, you got to study a little bit, just a little. But you get evaluated on multiple different fronts, and it's a huge human investment, not only on the learner, but on the teams of trainers that have to poke and prod and figure out where are your gaps in order to prepare you for your final assessment. And that process is Like the first time you do it, it's 6 months. Well, you have 6-month classroom training. That's very intense. It's like 14-hour days, collegiate level, like some of it's grad level courses where you're learning stuff like nuclear physics and, heat transfer and fluid flow and metallurgy and like how the academic aspect of how these things are built and why they work the way they do. But then you have to go into a training that they call prototype. And the prototype trainer is 1 month of classroom instruction followed by individual self-guided learning, where you have topics and you get this massive book that's given to you, like a 3-ring binder that you carry around for 6 months everywhere you go. And that book is filled with, on both sides, if I remember, it was like 400 pages long, both sides, fairly small font. And it's just a bunch of bullet points, sectioned off into sections and sort of groups of topics. And each line is a sentence about like one meta question. Explain how the ship service turbine generator works, or explain how the control system works for voltage regulation on turbine generator. And that question has a box next to it. Well, 2 boxes and a barcode. Signature box 1 is for the learner to confirm that they have self-taught themselves. And you're given this massive library full of all this like classified information. Your job is to independently research that topic and learn it as quickly as you can. And then the second box is for an instructor to sit you down in a meeting room that has 3 walls of the room are whiteboards, and you get this big pile of whiteboard markers. And they ask you questions. They drill you on that topic. You can bring reference materials, schematics, and diagrams and stuff in there with you, but you can't bring the actual answer books with you. And you get evaluated on either, for really quick stuff, it's 15 minutes. For the most complex stuff, it's 4 hours in that room. And you do this 6 days a week for 6 months. And then interspersed with that is physical on-the-job training, where you're sitting with a staff instructor operating a real nuclear reactor, and they're there to slap your hand in case you're going to, do something bad that's going to damage things or hurt people. But that whole process is super stressful. Like the dropout rate was 40% or something in that prototype trainer. The classroom, that was like 90% dropout rate. But in the prototype, we had 40% of people that just dropped out of that school because of the intensity of like, hey, I have all these things that I need to learn really quick, and I don't even know where this information is, or I can't self-adjudicate. Because if you sign up for that hour evaluation for a moderately complex topic, you don't find out until minute 59 whether you failed. And if you fail the assessment, you got to go back to your cubicle, go get the books and learn it. And you can't go and resubmit for an evaluation that same day, because they don't want short-term memory to influence being able to pass that. It has to be a long-term memory. So you have 72-hour wait time if you fail an eval to come back and reassess. So there's all these rules around that. But I can see tools like this, if they're enabled to have like that customized training and to be able to distill concepts down to here's what you really need to know, and then here's some supplementary information to really dive into these questions, preparing somebody in the most efficient way possible to be successful so they can safely do this job. Yeah, I think the opportunities are pretty broad for tools like this.
Yeah, I mean, we are up for really transforming that learning. And not only us, but other companies that are doing things. We've been talking about transforming learning for a very long time in higher education. I think it's finally going to happen.
And I had one more question. Sorry. Do you guys offer certifications and like build certification courses?
We don't, and because we're not in the content business, we're the platform for people to create their content. So what happens is that organizations will create the courses, and then we'll establish that the learner taking that course certifies them in whatever they need to know. And
Got it.
there's not really an authority on certification.
Yeah.
And usually it's the owner of the information.
Yeah, but theoretically, if there's enough trust in the tool, you could create courses that are robust enough to be certification courses.
Yes, we could. And there has been asked before, do we want to start in the business of having a
Right.
catalog of courses? And I've been in that business, and I don't. It's a very difficult business to be in. And that would be a whole nother podcast.
So, yeah. You'd have to hire a whole team of experts to like keep that stuff up to date. That's why I think it's an important thing on your FAQ that I read. That is, I think it's a really smart decision that you made, in that a lot of companies feel pretty protective of their intellectual property for internal documentation, internal processes. That's what makes their business successful in certain ways. And your tool is very adamant, and it's very prominently displayed on your website. Like, we don't own your stuff. We don't take copies of it. We don't store any of your data. What you generate is owned by you, and we're just giving you the tools to build that content, and then you manage that. I think that's a recipe for you to get support in governmental type stuff. Because other competing products that might be doing like, oh, we'll build courses for you, that'll never fly in like a secure environment.
No, we as part of our onboarding, we co-create, because there's still, you have to train the customer on how to use the tool. And sometimes they don't know where to start. They can't really think as an instructional designer and say, what is the first course I should do? And so we co-create with them, but we don't own it. And our goal is to co-create until they're ready, and then out. We don't want to be in the content business. I've been in the content business. It's really hard business to be in. And much rather be in the platform business. But if you need to help them, then you help them.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I think we're at about time. I will quickly summarize. So first, when doing business internationally, empathy is essential. Second, when you're pacing projects, Luis specifically looks for little 5-year chunks. That'll give you about a 2 to 3 year time frame to see if it's catching on. And then from there, you can go into other things and have other people take your position. And then learning is built on memorization of context. And then from there, you can go perform higher level thinking with the chunks of context that you learned. And then finally, do not be in the content business. So, Luis, if people want to learn more about you or Pete, where should they go?
Well, we have the easiest domain possible is pete.com, PETE.com. And you can read all about it in there. And drop us a line if you want a demo. Request a demo. We're also in LinkedIn and at Pete Learning, and you can find me there, or you can find me in LinkedIn at Luis E. Garcia, and find me in LinkedIn and connect with me. Love to show you our platform, and if you think your company can use our help, love to give it to you.
Awesome. All right. Well, until next time, it's been Michael Burke and my co-host
Ben Wilson.
And have a good day, everyone.
We'll catch you next time.